So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the final lecture of Buddhism as a Lived Experience monthly lecture series with Dr. Louise Lancaster, jointly organized by the Department of Religious Study and REL Graduate Council, and sponsored by the Institute for the Study of Humanistic Buddhism, University of West. I'm Miro Sake, Chair of the Department of Religious Study. Before we begin, I would like to request Dr. Minhua Ta, President of the University of West, to give an opening remark.
Welcome, everyone. This is so nice to see you again. To join us with the lecture series organized by University of the West with the special guest of Professor Lancaster. Okay. I find tonight a topic to be very interesting, behavior, the act of consequence, which many of us would refer to as karma. I'm looking forward to listen and also to read your question and the discussions. Even though today's lecture is the last lecture of this series, but we are very blessed with the fact that Dr. Lancaster have agreed to come back for series number 2 in the fall of 2021. So yes, so we will send out more information regarding how you can register. And please pay attention to our newsletter that usually sent out by the Graduate Council of Religious Study, more specific from SAM. Or you can also visit our website to look for the link to register for series number 2. I want to express my sincere gratitude to Professor Lancaster for his tireless contribution to University of the West and his willingness to share his knowledge and wisdom with us in the last many, many months. Many of us, including myself, have continued to benefit from his lecture. At the same time, I also want to thank you, Professor Sakia, for your leadership and the support of the Graduate Student Council of Religious Study for all your work in supporting the series. Again, looking forward to listen to the lecture. Have a wonderful summer. Please keep in touch with us. If you have any input, we have many other lectures also, which we will also organize in the fall. We need your ongoing support and help us spread the word of University of the West, the good work that we have done. And we also open for your input and feedback on how to enhance everything that we have done so far. Thank you and stay safe.
Thank you, President Ta, for sharing good news and also your support for our talk program. Today, it is a great honor and pleasure to welcome and introduce our distinguished speaker, Dr. Louise Lancaster. So Dr. Lancaster is Emeritus Professor of the Department of East Asian Language at the University of California, Berkeley, and the University of West. And Dr. Lancaster has been offering insightful lectures on various topics of Buddhism for the last 9 months. Today, this series came to an end. So I want to thank Dr. Lancaster for kindly donating his time to share his valuable experience with us. It was nothing short of excellence. It not only informed us, but it also inspired and motivated. So the series has made such a positive impact on our lives. Words are not powerful enough to give you how grateful we are to you. Thank you so much. And the topic of today's lecture is behavior, act of consequences. The concept of karma is more complicated than it appears. So the Buddha taught about karmic conditioning, which is a process by which a person's nature is shaped by their moral action. Every action we take molds our characters for the futures. So in today's talk, Dr. Lancaster will explain what does karma means to Buddhists, and can karma ever be erased, or is it the case that one perform the fruit is with me forever? So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Lancaster.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Maroj. I want to thank all the people who've helped make this possible for this series. President Ta for supporting it, Maroj, Jane Iwamura, Venerable Shirananda for organizing, Sam Fang for making the graphics for the invitations, Chris Johnson for doing all of the technical issues. The list goes on and on. For all of you, I really appreciate it. It could not have been done without your very good help. So I'll give this last lecture and then we'll have some Q&A. Thank you all for joining for this last time. I appreciate the support all the way through, and that you keep coming back is very nice. I recently listened to an interview with a young athlete who was in the middle of his first year in the major league of professional basketball. And he was asked, what is the hardest but most important thing you have learned since you started to play at this level? Without pause, the young man replied, learning how to lose. As a gifted performer who has reached the pinnacle of his success, his years in high school and college were on teams that were champions, some years without a single defeat. He was well able to understand winning. However, in the professional league, teams are fortunate to win as many as they lose. And even the leaders may lose a third of their games. Coaches often admit that how they handle defeat and how their teams handles it is the key to long-term success. As long as we win, it appears that success is guaranteed. But what happens when we face loss? Our religious literatures are filled with stories that try to determine how to test people to see if their behavior is equal to the difficulties that beset humans. The figure of Job in the Hebrew Bible is a dramatic example of human suffering that seems to be undeserved. It has similarities to some of the Jataka stories in Buddhism. The story of Job opens with him living a good life, following all the ethical and moral standards, enjoying financial and personal success. It appears to be a story of how acting in a proper way will be rewarded. However, the scene is abruptly interrupted by the fallen angel, Satan, who observes the happy and contented Job, but being a trickster, challenges God He taunts, certainly Job is obedient to you, cheerful and full of praise, but what is his real character? Anyone can be content when all of life is easy, successful, and rewarding. But what, challenges Satan, would Job be like if he found himself in a dilemma in which all was stripped away? If he lost his health, his family, his wealth, his whole support system? Satan says to God, you will never know Job's true feelings toward you, his real thoughts, until he is tested to the limit of his strength. And so testing begins. Satan is allowed to strip Job of all his possessions, friends, and family. And needless to say, Job is confused and tormented and questions God about what is happening. Well, in Buddhism, the story of King ISHB has a similar test of character and fortitude. King ISHB is the ruler of a vast and prosperous land. He's revered by his subjects, known for his wisdom and compassion. And into this scene come two deities, Brahma and Chakra. They, like Satan in the book of Job, ask the question as to whether King ISHB really has the ability to deal with all the challenges that life has to offer. So one of the gods changes himself into a dove and the other into a hawk. The dove flies to King ISHB and in a state of fear and panic says, "Oh, great king, save me. Save me from the hawk who's going to kill me." King ISHB immediately responds, gathers the dove in his arms, assuring the creature that he has vowed to protect all sentient beings, all living beings, and the dove has nothing to fear. Well, through the window flies the hawk, who demands that the dove be given to him. The king explains he can't do that because he's vowed to protect all living beings from harm. So the hawk throws out his challenge. Am I not a living creature? Do I not require newly killed flesh in order to live? Will you deny me food? Will you allow me to die? So King ISHB is shaken out of his complacency and assurance. And he thinks to himself, there's no gain to kill one in order to save one. He is torn about how to act in a dilemma that seems to have no solution. But finally he thinks, I have a body of flesh. Suppose I cut off parts of it and feed the hawk. It'll be a gift. No bad karma will result for the hawk. However, the hawk is not going to let him off so easily. He says, it will be terribly painful for you to cut off your flesh. And you will only do a tiny bit of cutting. And the amount will not come close to the amount of flesh that is on the dove. Here is a scale. I will put the dove in one pan, and you must cut off enough flesh to balance her weight. King ISHB agrees, starts to put parts of his own skin and bone onto the scale. The hawk is still testing, and no matter how much is put in the pan, it is never enough to equal the dove. In desperation, the king thinks, I've tried to reach a state of release over many lifetimes, and I've always failed. Now I must not waver in my determination. And he finally throws his whole body onto the scale. The gods appear before him and praise his action. These stories have been in my mind when I've made prison visitations, where the inmates have been stripped of clothes, money, family, friends, reputation, self-worth, even hope for future prospects. These men have inspired me by the fact that they can endure these hardships and can even accept their situation and, in some cases, become compassionate supporters of those around them. During the pandemic, I have met 3 men who had lived the good life, raised in bounty, intelligent, able to accomplish much. All 3 said they had never had a serious setback until in middle age, they have lost wealth, fame, and friends. In the dark journey through their reversals, all that they possessed fell to ashes, and they despaired. Well, just as with some of the prisoners, these 3 endured, found sources of strength they never knew they had, and learned they could face it all. Honest and brave enough to live in the moment of pain and trauma. Excuse me. None of the inmates are the businessmen who survive these difficulties express anger. Instead, they have a feeling of appreciation for the growth and understanding that came with the effort needed to survive. They have all learned how to lose. And in learning that, they have learned how to live. During this pandemic, all of us have discovered some surprising things. Who among us knew that we could live in near isolation, facing the potential of illness or even death, in some cases losing jobs and income? When my wife and I were faced with her terminal cancer prognosis, we were like Job. We questioned, how could this happen? What could have been done to prevent it? Why did it strike her? Well, the poor doctor who was called upon time and again to answer these questions said, it was just bad luck. A cell failed to divide properly and slowly spread this illness. As her disease progressed, every day was stressful and demanding. I thought to myself that it was like Chakra and Brahma were testing me. After years of lecturing on Buddhism, I faced the question of how much was just talk and how much was a message truly a part of my life. As I sat there wondering how I was going to bear the difficult days that lay ahead, my wife, as if reading my mind, took hold of my hand and said, we can do this. From that moment, we stopped lamenting and questioning. We were learning how to lose. Our life was to do what needed to be done on that day. And we all hope that our actions are purposeful. that our behavior has social purpose, that what we do will allow us to have our status and ensure our financial resources. We cling to the idea that if we have expertise, it will be our pathway to power over events and the acts of others. However, there are times when we are tested to our limit, whether it's illness, old age, death, loss of power, or assurance of success. And this leads us to the Buddhist idea of behavior and its consequences. The first of the Noble Truths, there is anguish, comes to us all at some point, no matter how exemplary we have behaved. We all get visited by the three great messengers: illness, old age, and death. The question is not why we have these trials, it is how we will respond to them. At one level, it can appear that we have little control over what happens to us. COVID came upon us and to all humanity, not dependent on our behavior as much as being a force of infection with its own mechanism and survival strategies. We were challenged to change our way of living, to use our best resources to find a vaccine, and to seek to understand the reality of the situation. Some years ago, I failed in my attempt to do the right thing. It was an event that took place in one of my favorite cities, Santa Fe, New Mexico. As I was walking down one of the side streets, a woman opened the door of her out-of-state SUV and, to my horror and anger, threw into the street all the wrappings and containers from a lunch of hamburgers and milkshakes. I was filled with anger. I couldn't ignore it, and went up to her and berated her for throwing trash and littering. She tried to ignore me, but I stood so she could not close her door and just continued to say, "You must clean this up." Finally, she did so and drove off. When I ran around the corner, there was all the same trash. She had simply thrown it out again. My anger had been transferred to her, and she drove away from me filled with emotions I had helped generate. I continued to think back to that event and wonder how I could have handled it better. Had I somehow performed an inferior, wholesome action? Are there inferior, wholesome actions? I wonder if I'd approached her and said, "I know it's difficult to know what to do with all the trash when you're traveling. We're both visitors and obviously like this place. I would like to help you get rid of the trash." Who knows how she would have reacted? But I suspect it would have made a difference to her way of acting. Buddhist teachings about action are varied and somehow in conflict, sometimes in conflict over the centuries and in different locations. There are many questions that are still being debated. Is every action in my life completely controlled by the karmic residue of the past? Or are there natural events that do not have their origin in my personal actions? Can karma ever be erased? Or is it the case that once performed, the fruit is with me forever? These inquiries would require many hours to discuss, and we have only minutes for this time together. Briefly, what drives my action? Do I have a predisposition to act according to an inner critical voice? Am I listening to that inner voice that tells me what to do? Is there inside a critic that speaks to me? And is that critic driven by thoughts of what others think and expect? Is there action which creates neither good nor bad results? How can I control the effect of anger and emotion that arises in my daily life? Can we avoid the toxins of the three poisons? Impatient greed, revengeful anger, unfocused confusion. Buddhists teach that whatever we do to others, we must first do it for ourselves. So does this mean that before I give advice, I need to teach myself the lesson? If I want to shout to somebody, you should not be doing this, how do I teach myself that I may not be doing what I should be doing? And when I've learned the lesson for myself, how do I treat others? It seems to me that often teaching someone a lesson really often means, how can I punish and shame those who do wrong? Can it be possible that if we first teach ourselves, we can reach the point where we share rather than teach or lecture? I've been trying to do this during these talks. Not just being the professor who has all the answers, but sharing the journey to comprehend what is happening to us. Well, as you have seen, I don't always succeed. Often find myself giving a lecture, falling back to an old familiar way of behaving. I have myself tried to profit from these talks because I've tried to teach myself about the issues while I attempt to find words to share with you. One of the things I've come to recognize more clearly is that when I have an act of thinking, the energy flow from that thought races through my brain, and the consequences are reflected, whether it is an insight or one of the poisons of greed, hate, and delusion. Our personal acts are of enormous importance. Every word we say, every thought we think, every movement of our body are acts that produce karma, that is, a lasting effect on ourselves and others. if I'm deceiving myself about what my true thought is, then I face the toxicity of delusion and confusion, and I pass that on to others. We need to have full awareness when we act. And we need to have compassion for ourselves and for one another. We must learn how to deal with loss in ourselves, as well as how to deal with it when we see it in others. My little neighborhood boy often gives me his wisdom when I take my walk by his house. As I was writing this lecture, he told me of going down to the beach and how a wave washed up, knocked him over, and he fell under the water. When he saw that I was concerned, he assured me, "Don't worry." I stood up again. That's as good a lesson as any we've shared doing these talks. I hope I can stand up again in my life's journey. As my wife told me, we can do this. We can do this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lou, for the wonderful and insightful talk. I greatly appreciate it. So the first question, so if you have any questions, please write down on the chat box. So I will ask one question. What sense can we make of karma given we as modern people have grown up in a scientific culture? I'll put in it.
Yeah. Yes, we think of ourselves as being scientific. I'm not at all sure that I'm scientific. There are just so many times when I feel I'm not. But I think that what Buddhists are trying to say with karma, part of it, I think none of us can deny. The acts we perform have consequences. Whatever you do, whatever I do, there are consequences. There are results. And those results can reverberate like ripples in the water for a very long time. Now, Christmas Humphreys, a famous Buddhist head of the London Buddhist Society back in the early 20th century, he was a judge. And somebody asked him about karma, and he said, well, it's a little hard for me to say to somebody, what's happened to you is because of something done by somebody that you don't even remember. And you're having to bear the brunt of their action. I don't worry so much about how much karma I have from my former lives. I got enough to worry about what's happening with my karma in this life. How can I handle it? How can I deal with the fact that what I do and what I think and what I say has ramifications far beyond me? And I don't think you have to be scientific or non-scientific to try to deal with the consequences of action. Don't know that that fully answers it.
It's a wonderful answer. Thank you. There's no question yet. So please write down. If you have any question, please write down on the chat box.
I tell you them, the question is, my wife just had her second stroke, and our son has CLL cancer. I too am wondering how I get through this. So I think of your loss often and see how you deal, and it gives me the strength. Thank you for talking about it. Well, thank you for being willing to be in the present with that much pain and that much sorrow. That's painful. I'm very sorry to hear such a question. And I know how hard it is. That's why I told the story about the little boy saying, yeah, I got knocked down, but don't worry, I stood up again. I stood up again. And I think that's what we have to do in life. We're going to get some knocks and we're going to get some hard things. But I think we can still stand up again. And the more we face it, and the more we just accept that we have to do this. We can do this. That acceptance. I didn't know whether I could do it. I can tell you that. And through my wife's illness, there were many days when I thought, I just can't do this. Can I do this? This is just too hard. But somehow you stand up again. It's like one more day, one more hour.
Thank you, Luke. There's 3 questions we received. One from Pam. Can a moment of anger in an instant burn down a whole forest of merit we have accumulated?
Say that one again.
Can a moment of anger in an instant burn down a whole forest of merit we have accumulated?
Oh. No, I don't think it works that way. I don't think that you just wipe clean the slate in a second. At least for me, I think that the karmic result of my actions, I have to face up to them and I have to live with them. But I also have to live with the things that I've done right. It's just as important to know what you've done right as it is to know what you've done wrong. And we've all done things that didn't go right, but we've also, all of us, done things which were right and are right. Single acts are not going to reverse everything that we've done, by no means. They won't, it doesn't happen that fast. It's living. That's why I gave this lecture series, living. Living is moment by moment, day by day. It's not a flash in the pan. It's not a strobe light. It's all the work and effort it takes to get up every morning, to face our lives, to live them in the best way we can. Anger comes upon me. How can I deal with that anger? And I think the best possible thing that I can do is to understand that anger it's going to come. I can't stop my emotions. They just arise. But as soon as possible, can I understand that I've had this moment of anger and recognize that I don't have to let it consume me. I don't need to let it dominate me. Sometimes it does. I've always loved what Martin Luther King said. And I'm paraphrasing. He said, I've chosen as much as possible to love because hate is such a heavy burden to carry. And I think that that's what we want to do, is lay down that burden of anger as soon as we can. Not to forget it, not to deny it, just to lay it down and say, I had this feeling. Justified or not, I had it. And then I need to go on with my life. I just need to stand up again. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. Second question from Alex Amy. The question is, can we predict the result of our action?
Oh, Alex, I wish I could. But I think that we all have had to face that there are unintended consequences. Things happen. I didn't intend that to be what was going to happen. I didn't want that to be the thing that happened. It was unintended. And yet it happens. I've never been able to predict very well. And I think that prediction is really maybe a myth. There are so many variables. Who can tell what that variable is going to lead to? Who knows? That's why it is so important to try to understand that our acts of thinking and our acts of speaking are so important and consequential that we don't know what the result will be when we say them. And if you that's why I try to teach myself first if I can. It doesn't always work. If I could teach myself first and then share a word, then the consequences are probably as good as I can make them. I still don't know what those consequences are. When I look back in my life, someone once said, if you go back and trace your life, you're going to find that it's an absolute miracle that you're here. That your parents just happened to bump into each other in college or on the street. That we are all just the product of enormous numbers of events. So when I'm feeling down, I like to sit and think, well, it may be a tough day today, but I'm a living miracle. Here I am. I'm a miracle. Think of all the things that had to happen for me to be here. Even if one of them had gone a little bit astray, I wouldn't be here. Just my way of trying to deal with the dilemma of life where there is no easy solution. And life is not just solving. It's not just because we can't always solve it. What do you do if you're faced with a physical health issue which is going to result in death? No matter what you do, no matter what you do. That dilemma says that we have to think about action in a totally different way. That we are in this world of karmic results, if you will. Scientific or not, I think they are scientific. I think we are the product of billions of actions and effects. And we don't always have control. Maybe we never have control. But we can, if possible, lay down the burden. Like Martin Luther King said, hate is such a heavy burden. I might as well just put it down. Why carry it around? What do I gain from it? Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. Next question from President Ha. In the social justice perspective, karma could be a form of oppression. Do you agree?
Of course, President Ha. The structure into which we're born, that's karmic. It's the result of actions. And, you know, in the public schools, they're now doing something which is very interesting. Instead of punishing the particularly with bullies. You know, schools are full of bullies. And the kids who find out that they can bully other kids. So what they do now is the bullied and the bully have to sit down together with the teacher, and they have to both be given time to say their piece and not be interrupted, and try to see if they can have some form of reconciliation and justice. What is justice? Isn't justice when you say you have rewarded and you have punished? Is that what justice is? Or is justice somehow saying, and the result of some of this is quite remarkable. I've been following it a bit. When a bully is allowed to say their piece, as they talk, it changes them. And when the other person they bully is able to say to them their piece, to say, this is what it feels like when you do what you do to me. That sometimes they have not been aware even of how much it hurts. And when they become aware of the hurt they cause, there is a shift in behavior. It's like the whole issue of Black Lives Matter. How can people understand and really listen to the people who are treated in a particular way, which is so difficult and so harmful? Can we hear them? Can we speak to them? Do we give them a voice? And if we give them a voice, what about the people who are tormenting them? Can we give them a voice so they can hear themselves? Can we ask them to begin to understand how painful it is to be persecuted? When you look back to the Holocaust in Europe, it was not until after the war that lots of the people who were perpetrating such evil acts finally had to hear the voice of those who were being treated that way. And those people, in some cases, became real people. We need to teach our children from the very beginning, you can hurt people. And you can hurt them in all kinds of ways. And everybody gets hurt. Everybody. In our country, this great split that we have, I don't know how we can make sure that we begin to try to create a place where we hear ourselves saying what we so desperately want to say. And it's on both sides. How do we do that? How do we do it? Oppression is such a terrible thing. It is so destructive. It drains the energy of a society. It leaves us all poorer. So you've got to listen as well as speak out. There's suffering always. So I look at white supremacists and I hate what they say and I hate what they do. And yet with many of them, I can see they are so wounded. They are so hurting. And I don't know how to reach them. I don't know how to help them. But I can see how really painful life is for many of them, really painful, as it is for those they persecute. So I don't know, President Ta. It is karma. It's our acts, every one of our acts, our thoughts, our speech, our bodily action. And I think that we need, as I said, whatever I'm doing, and whenever I see that there is oppression, I must make sure, I think, that I see ways in which I oppress.
Thank you, Lou. We have 6-7 questions, but because of limited time, so we're not able to.
Okay.
I'll just take one last question.
I'll make my lecture shorter.
Last question. What do you think to recite sutra in making karma?
Karma is made by thought and word. To recite is to say a word. To have a thought, to say those words, to sit quietly, all of those are karmic acts. For many people, the chanting of a sutra is one of the healing things.
It is like they just choose by order.
It is one of the healing things in their life. And to say to somebody, well, what chanting, what does that do? What good is it? It's just saying words. But I think these are acts. And so we should take seriously any act. I take a walk every day. I walk about a mile. And since I have a cane and walk very slowly, that mile takes a long time. So I have a lot of time to think. And I use it as my thinking time. and I'm talking to myself, and I'm listening to my words, and I'm feeling my feelings, and I'm feeling my fears, and I'm sensing my angers. It is a daily, hourly process to handle all of that, to handle it. Well, I think our time is up. I want to thank all of you for joining in this lecture series. Your presence has made it inspiring for me to continue to be enthused about trying to give these lectures. Each one is a challenge to me. I told you, I think that my sister told me the one on enlightenment that I was in over my head. And I think often I'm in over my head. But my little boy down the street told me, just stand up again. Even if you're falling under the water and it's over your head, stand up again. But I appreciate all of you sharing with me. Thank you.
Lou.
Have a good summer.
Thank you, Lou, for an excellent talk. As President Tab announced before, so Dr. Lancaster's second lecture series will begin in fall, and further details will be announced shortly. So I hope you all can join again in our next series. At last, I would like to thank President Ta, Jane Ibumra, Dr. Sozan Ko, Christopher Johnson, Venerable D, and Venerable Srinanda Pong Sam for their support. And thank you all very much for your participation and support. Without your participation, it's not possible. Successful. Stay safe and good night. Thank you.
Yes, stay safe.